Hello, Tungsten Miner here. Today I'm going to continue this mod spotlight on refined storage. So last time I left off talking about this interface. So now let's get going talking about the rest of all this stuff. Okay, so here's another little setup. Again, crafting grid. We've got no items in here at the moment. Got a relay which is turned off. And we've got this item right here, which is an external storage. What this guy does is it allows you to hook up some kind of other inventory, a non-refined storage inventory, and treat it as though it's part of your whole system, which means when you look at your grid, it's going to list the contents of that inventory as being part of your system. Now at the moment I've got this relay turned on, or turned off rather, so that we don't see anything showing up in the crafting grid here, even though there's some oak wood planks in the chest here. If I switch this on, relay is now connecting this external storage block with the rest of the system, so now I should see those oak blocks. And if I take half of them out and go check the chest, sure enough, half of them have gone missing. If I toss them back into the chest, they're going to show up back over here in the grid. So your external storage allows you to treat any other inventory as part of your refined storage system. This does, however, cost you something. Now, in this case, it's just one little inventory, so it costs you one. But for example, if you were using storage drawers and you had this hooked up to the storage drawer controller, you'd be paying per drawer because each of them counts as a different inventory. So have a care before you hook this up to your massive storage drawers system because it might cost you more than you'd like. Okay, so here we have a little system set up to demonstrate readers and writers. Now, a reader is a device that's going to read some kind of signal coming from the external world, and a writer is a device that writes that same signal back again. So when you set up a reader, you type out what it is you want that channel to be named, and here I've got the redstone channel named and selected. It's a little bit darker gray, just very slightly. And then over on the writer, I went over here and I clicked on that because it showed up being connected to the same network. And grid is kind of irrelevant in this case. So if I add a redstone signal here, I've told this thing, hey, I want to transmit anything you read from this side over to that side. So that includes this redstone signal. And the writer is going to write the same signal that's being read on that channel over to the other side. So as I introduce a redstone signal here, this block notices that this thing has been activated with redstone because there's a lever on it. And it's going to pick up that signal, transmit it through the network at arbitrarily far, and then transmit through this writer the same redstone signal to this block. Now, there's also another mode you can use this in, which is for items. So here I've got a channel which I just decided to call items because it's nice and simple. And I've got an item hopper, which has nothing in it. Going through the system here, I've got a writer that's using the same channel name, and it's connected to this item hopper over here. So if I take the items out and I drop them into this hopper here, you immediately notice they're starting to go down pretty rapidly. Well, that reader is reading them, that writer is writing them, and here they are showing up back into this hopper over on this side. And this, of course, could be any old inventory that you like. And naturally, you don't have to have a reader attached to them. So this reader is just going to notice things that are pushed to it. But it's pretty flexible. You know, we can do items, we can do redstone, it can do liquids, whatever you happen to want to push to it. Here, I wanted to demonstrate the detector. Now, the detector is a device that allows you to notice how many of a certain kind of item are in the system. Now, at the moment, I've got it set to emit a signal when it's less than a certain amount. And we can take a look at the grid here. I've got 64 oak planks, and I'm saying, tell me when there's less than 30. So if I grab out all of the oak planks, immediately this thing kicks off a redstone signal saying, hey, there's less than 30. And I can take this and I can drop in 1, 2, 3, a bunch, no changes. But if I drop in all of them, redstone signal goes off. Now, this is helpful, of course, for letting you know that there's some stuff either missing or too much or whatever in your system. But there's a bunch of other refined storage devices that can be triggered by redstone. So you can use this thing to notice that a certain condition has arisen, and then have another refined storage device right next to it that is going to act when that redstone signal is received. So maybe there's a destroyer, or what is it, destructor, that is breaking items down, and you only want it to do this when there's less than a certain amount of that item there. And so you stop harvesting that crop when you've got enough wheat in your system. And when the wheat falls below a certain level, you use this detector to notice that that has happened, sets off a redstone signal, and maybe you've got it connected to a destructor that starts harvesting that crop again. So that's the detector. Next, let's start talking about some of the wireless systems that we have here. So we've got a controller, we've got our storage, and we've got a bit of cable and this wireless transmitter attached here. And it has a range of 16 blocks, which is the length of that red sand you can see over here. So to use this system, we want to use this wireless grid. Now I've got the creative version so it doesn't run out of power, but ordinarily you just power these things up with a little bit of RF power and everything's good. So if I just right-click this thing in the air, I now have access to the contents of this storage system, or what's in that 1K storage block. In this case, just some oak planks. And if I walk out here, anywhere in the middle, I can still right-click and still see what's going on. Even up to standing on this last block here, I can still see it. But if I go one step further, no wireless transmitter in range, which means I'm too far away to be able to receive from that antenna. Now, of course, I can set up some cables and set up another antenna and increase my range that way. But another option is to make this range upgrade. Now, there's a lot of upgrades, so let's talk a moment. Refine storage and upgrade. There we go. Let's talk about some of these upgrades. The range upgrade is just what it sounds like. If I take this range upgrade and I apply it to a wireless transmitter, I now get up to 24 blocks as the range. So I can run out here to the edge of what previously was too far, and I'm still getting my signal. This is the ultimate block, farthest away, 1 meter further, nothing in range. So I can add up to 4 upgrades to pretty much all of those refined storage machines. So in this case, none of the other upgrades make a lot of sense for a wireless transmitter, but certainly a range upgrade does. The only other one that kind of does make sense is this interdimensional upgrade, which allows you to see things from the nether. And I'm not going to go to the nether right now, so yeah, that would be a pretty fascinating thing. The way you make upgrades, recipe for all of them, is to take an upgrade part, which is just some more of that quartz-enriched iron, an improved processor, some glass, and that gets you the housing, basically. And then your recipe for the upgrade itself. In this case, we're going to use an ender pearl and some redstone, but if we wanted a speed upgrade, we'd use some sugar and redstone. Speed upgrades are good for making any machine that takes time to do some operation, do that operation faster. So importers, exporters, a lot of the interface, a lot of the machines we've talked about so far will only import at a certain rate or export at a certain rate. You can make them do that faster by dropping in a speed upgrade. And of course, you can put up to 4 of them in all of these machines. Get back to crafting upgrades later. A stack upgrade means do a whole stack at a time instead of one item at a time. Interdimensional upgrade, for those things where it matters, do this across dimensions. Silk Touch, Fortune, 1, 2, and 3 all apply to the destructor so that you have those effects when you're harvesting whatever it is that's in front of that destructor. So that gives us wireless capabilities using our creative wireless grid in this case, or your regular wireless grid. And a little bit about doing upgrades to make these machines go faster or smarter or whatever. Speaking of wireless, we have here a wireless network transmitter. And what this thing does is it allows you to send basically a wireless signal between itself and a receiver, which is effectively the same thing as running cables from here to there. Except, of course, you don't have to actually run the cables. So it's a little bit, well, it's a lot cheaper in terms of creation costs. So our refined storage network transmitter is, oh, where is it? There, that's the receiver, and here's the transmitter. Not exactly cheap. You need some diamonds for these guys. Construction core, destruction core is not too bad. Machine casing, couple of ender pearls. So yeah, you're not going to be making these right away. But once you are able to make them, they can send a signal as far as you like. Now, this is going 8 blocks because I happen to put the other receiver 8 blocks away. But we can see network transmitter 82 RF per tick. No, this is RS, but never mind that. RF per tick. So this is using quite a lot of energy to make that connection. And the receiver is using energy of its own. So this is definitely something you're going to want to make sure your power system is up for powering. And it's also something where you might want to use one of those relays to be able to cut off the transmitter from the receiver, just in case you're not going to be over at that part of your base or that other segment of your base for quite a while. Save yourself a lot of power that way. So over here we can see in this grid, I've got some planks. Over here I can go check out the same planks. Of course, if I take out the jungle wood ones, I would expect, hey, look, no more jungle wood ones over there. Drop the jungle ones back over here, and sure enough, they show up back over here. So just as though I had run cables between this grid and the rest of the system, I've now got this network receiver, which takes the place of all those cables. The other thing to notice, I don't have a controller over here. So you still only want the one controller for any connected system. And the power for this grid over here is in fact provided by this controller over here. So you can have all of these connected up together to the one controller and have that be the one place that you have to route power to. And it can move power wirelessly through everywhere else. Naturally, it takes a lot of power to do all this, so make sure you've got a good power system going on. So that's the network transmitter and receiver. Okay, finally, last little bit to talk about is the most complicated. So bear with me here. Let's go slow. One of the things that you can do with refined storage is to set up automated crafting. So in this case, looking at my grid here, this is a pattern grid. And what it allows me to do is to put items in here, drop in a pattern, and then define some craftable items. And the way this works is I've got a crafter over here, is another one of these blocks, and in it I've got a couple of these different patterns that allows me to define how do you go about making a certain kind of object. So in this case I can make 4 oak wood planks from one piece of oak wood. 2 oak wood planks makes me 4 sticks, and 1 oak wood plank with 2 sticks gets me a shovel. And the way you make these is relatively straightforward. I'm just going to grab myself a pattern. Oh, where is the pattern? There it is. And we'll go over here, and let's say I just take this oak wood, drop it in the grid, and it knows, of course, because this is a crafting grid, that that's what you're going to get. And I'm going to take my pattern, drop it up here. This is one that's brand new, completely empty, create pattern, and now it's recorded that these things are what they are. And I can drop this in here, change the recipe to something else, and write over this pattern. So once you've made one of these little guys, you can reuse it as much as you like, just changing out whatever you're going to make. So let's say I wanted to make a whole ton of shovels. Well, I don't have any shovels in here right now, but I do have these craftable items in here. So I can change my display to no craftables, just the items that are actually stored. Only craftables, these are the things that I can make, but nothing that's actually in the system, or both. So let's say I want to make some shovels. Well, I click on the shovel, and it's going to ask me how many do I want to make. So let's say I want to make 64 of them. And I'm going to hit start. It's going to give me a preview of what it's going to make. So it's going to make 64 shovels. To do that, it needs to make 128 sticks. To do that. So since I've gotten a whole bunch of these patterns in here, I've got the one for oak wood planks from wood. I've got the one for sticks. I've got the one for the shovel. I had to make all the intermediate steps or this wouldn't work. So I'll go in here, we'll say that, and hit start, and start again. And now it's actually going to craft them. You can see it's working its way through. This object is a crafting monitor, and it's showing me what is being made. And in fact, it's showing me the whole nested set of things being made, one at a time. So in order to make these shovels, I'm inserting items, I'm working through this, crafting these ones. At any point, I can hit cancel and stop a particular step, or I can just stop everything. And since this is busy, and the crafter can only make one thing at a time, that top level thing that's all the way off to the left here, I can click the top one of those and delete any of those by hitting cancel, or just kill everything by hitting cancel all. And now when I look at my grid, I can see, sure enough, I've got 64 shovels and I've used up half of my wood, and none of this stuff is left. So that's using the crafter to be able to make recipes. You start off by making your patterns, drop them in the crafter, and then the crafter can go to town and do whatever it wants to do. You can make a bunch of crafters and have them all in here. If they have all the same recipes and same patterns, then they'll spread the work out amongst themselves automatically so that they go as quickly as possible. If you have a crafter that has some part of a recipe, because you've only got so many slots here, you might need more crafters if you're trying to make something really complicated. But these are a really handy way to make some of those really complicated items. And you can imagine, for example, making some of those storage disks, saying, hey, I want to make a 16K or 64K storage disk. And so long as you've got the patterns in there for the lower level storage elements, it'll automatically go ahead and make the whole thing for you. Now, it might take a little while because it's going to have to do it piece by piece, but it'll get there. Back here, I've got a demonstration of integrating with some stuff that's outside of the refined storage system, because of course the crafter only replaces the crafting table, and for certain recipes you only need a furnace, you need who knows what other stuff. Think about thermal expansion, think about immersive engineering, all these very high-tech mods, industrial craft that have machines that make very specialized items. This is how you tie them in. So let's walk through this one step at a time. So to start with, let's talk about this guy, Processing Pattern Encoder. This guy allows you to make patterns for things that are not just crafting patterns. Any inputs, any outputs you like, drop a pattern in here, process it through, and that's going to turn into a pattern that can be used in an arbitrary fashion, not just for a crafting grid style pattern. In this case, I'm going to say iron ore, 8 of them gets turned into iron ingots, 8 of them. So this is really just a promise that a certain external machine is going to behave a certain way. Up here I've got my crafter, which is facing down. In here I've got a wrench. And one of the things that the wrench is good for is if you shift right click, you can change the orientation. So you notice that face right there, that's what has to be facing towards the machine you want to use. So I'm going to keep right-clicking it until, now that face is downward again. If it isn't facing towards the machine, then the system won't work because it won't be able to find the machine. Inside the crafter, I've got a pattern that takes 8 iron ore and makes it into 8 iron ingots. I've got an exporter, which keeps this thing fueled up with coal. I've got an importer, which pulls all the goods out of the furnace. And so now I've got an ability to use this furnace to make iron. So I can click on iron, say I want to make just one of them, hit start, and you notice in order to craft one of these, it's going to need 8 of these. That's because of the way I set up my pattern. I wanted to economize my use of coal, and so I said you need 8 ore to make 8 ingots, which of course matches up to exactly how much can be smelted with one piece of coal. So at a minimum, I'm going to make 8 of these, even though it says that's not how this works. So I hit start, I look at my monitor, and sure enough, it's putting in 8 iron ingots in order to get one, because it knows, I'm gonna get 8 of them with this recipe that's in there. And it implements the recipe as many times as it needs to, but it implements it fully each time. So here it dropped in 8, and now it's working its way through. And this guy is keeping this coal stocked up, so it burned off one piece of coal and immediately filled it back up again. So as I sit here and wait, it's going to work its way through and produce all of this iron. And bit by bit, because I've got an importer that's grabbing the iron out of the furnace, it's going to wind up back here in my inventory. So now you can imagine I've got a furnace smelting things. I could take my crafting recipes over here. Instead of making this shovel, I could make it be a metal shovel. And I can use the metal produced this way with the recipes over here. So by combining the pattern encoded recipes, which are just an arbitrary promise of what an external machine can do, along with the actual patterns that we create using this pattern grid, which is just a slightly different kind of input grid, we can make things that are both made from a crafting table as well as things that are made from external machines, and set up a truly automated pipeline for building pretty much anything. Okay, so that's it for refined storage. Really neat mod, really cool way of combining very concise, compact storage with automated crafting, with some neat mechanisms for sharing your crafting system across wide distances from one place to another, being able to interact with blocks in the world over here, interact with other storage systems from other mods, being able to have some flexibility about how exactly you represent all of this storage, and even be able to store and craft with fluids. Really cool mod. It's based actually on a mod called Applied Energistics. A long while ago, Applied Energistics looked almost exactly like refined storage. It had very many of the same features, very many of the same kind of blocks, all the same capabilities. But in the time since then, Applied Energistics has gotten very much more complicated, and you have to be really, really into the mod to be able to figure out all of its ins and outs and how it works. So refined storage is created fairly recently as a throwback to be able to get just the simple parts, or just those nice parts that are a little bit easier to understand, a little bit easier to use from Applied Energistics way back when. If you liked the video, go ahead and hit like. If you want to know when more mod spotlights are out or Let's Play videos, go ahead and hit subscribe, and I will talk to you later.